My name is Kevin Duggan. I'm the Director of Development for Games for Change. I've worked with the organization for a number of years, and I moderated these sessions last year, which were great. I think it's a really wonderful, unique opportunity to have these sort of, if not exactly one-on-one, at least to hear directly from folks, really spanning the nonprofit sector, the for-profit, government agencies, venture, who are all interested in supporting the work of games creators and immersive media. And it's also, these sessions are meant to be very interactive as much as they can be in the virtual space. So just some quick housekeeping. So in Hopin, you can double click on a window, which will enlarge it. So when Harry's doing his presentation, you might want to do that to view it better. These sessions are short, they're half an hour. So after the presentation, we usually have like 15 or 20 minutes to answer questions, which we'll do through text chat. Again, we want to try and maximize the amount of the number of questions that we can sort of field, and that seems like the most efficient way to do that. It's probably best if you hold your question until after the presentation, because one, Harry will probably answer a lot of your questions through the presentation, and we'll make sure that they're the most relevant questions, and also rather than sort of filling up the queue, so that'll give us a chance. So when Harry's done, I'll come back on the screen, and then we'll start going through the queue from top to bottom. Also, if we don't get to all your questions, I think in Harry's presentation he has his email address, and maybe he can post it in the chat later, or you can do it now, Harry, if you want. Hopin also allows you to direct message folks through the People tab. No guarantee that when you're going to get a response, because obviously we're all really busy. So you could try that as well, and Harry will do what he can to respond if we don't get to your questions here. Okay, I think that's so it's. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Harry Hamer of LVP, which I discovered stands for London Venture Partners, and Harry is joining us from London, which is great. I don't know if you heard Susanna's remarks at the beginning of the festival this morning. One of the there are certainly drawbacks to having to do a virtual festival. One of the great pluses is it enables us to have someone like Harry join us from London. It's fantastic. So briefly, Harry is an analyst at LVP, focuses on engaging with game entrepreneurs, LPs, due diligence, deal execution, and supporting existing portfolio companies. And maybe he'll explain some of what all that means.
I'd like to, I've been promoted to associate as of a couple of weeks ago, so I'm technically now an associate.
Kudos. That's great. And actually, I'll leave it there, and I'm going to make way for Harry to jump in, do his presentation, and we'll come back to the chat.
My screen now. Hope it should all work smoothly, because it was working before.
I can see it.
Is that works? Yeah. Great. Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Harry from LVP. Nice to meet you. How we're thinking about formatting this is I spend roughly half, maybe less, maybe more, of the time that we have describing a bit of what we do here at LVP, who we are, but then also fielding some more interactive questions that you might have, so that I'm able to cover all the bases. So the agenda, we've got an introduction to LVP, a little bit of an insight on at least how we evaluate pitches, but also VCs in general evaluate pitches, and then also the Q&A session. So at LVP, we invest exclusively into the gaming ecosystem. So that's into content studios, as well as on the tech side. So that's the picks and shovels within the ecosystem as well as platforms. And when we say into disruptive companies, it really depends on your definition of disruptive. And I think maybe that's a hangover from more from more aggressive terminology coming from Silicon Valley. How I view disruptive companies is anything that can either enlarge the overall market as well as take down larger incumbents within the market. And that can be, in the case of actually our most recent investment, a change for good. So I can go into that more later on, but being disruptive, at least for us, doesn't necessarily mean being a Travis Kalanick from Uber and being extremely aggressive in the market and reducing overall surplus for everyone else. So how we invest is at the seed stage, and what that really means is we try to be the first money in, first institutional money at least, if not first money full stop, because that's where we believe we can provide the most value. And as I'll go on into the next slide, it's really where we come from, having that scrappiness and operational experience to help you out. And we've invested into companies that have generated 18 billion of company value. And breaking down what that means is we invested into 40, 50 companies, and there are a few companies now, including Supercell, which is at 10 billion, that have succeeded. And that probably indicates, given that one company out of the 40, 50 that we've invested into generated most of the returns, it gives you an indication of what we're having to deal with it on the venture side and balancing our portfolio, but also the kind of returns that we're looking for when we invest into companies, i.e. that we're looking for a 10x. And again, I'll return to that later on. Who are we? We basically are games people. The partners have got something ridiculous, like 60, 70 years experience in the games industry. And we bring different strengths and competencies when it comes to the games industry. David Gardner was employee number 11 at EA and helped scale their international division. He was sent out from America, and he scaled that from basically nothing to $1 billion in annual revenue. David Lau-Key, he brings with him his skills on the technical side. When he was at Criterion, he helped develop Renderware, which was a graphical input system for consoles that I think had 25% of the console market in the 90s. And he met David Gardner when Criterion was acquired by EA. And same with Ari, actually. He was at Playfish, which is a startup, social gaming startup, and they're acquired by EA. And he brings with him experience on the game design and operational side. On my background, I come from more of a finance and tech side. Previously, I was in venture capital investing into early stage UK tech startups, and then actually slowly turned to the dark side of interactive entertainment through investing into TV and film, and then looking at games. Again, a few more slides on credentials. We invest into Supercell. We've been doing this for now a decade. Unity, Natural Motion, Playfish, and yeah, those returns have done us pretty well over the years. What does a VC actually do? How does it operate? And I think there can be some misconceptions here. The lifeblood of a VC is finding those investable opportunities, and we see around 1,000 of those over the course of a year. We then filter that down into 30 that, again, as I will explain later, we go through our criteria. Is this applicable to us? Is this investable? And then from there, what we actually invest into is a small percentage of that. So we've got now 22 active investments that we help out with regularly. So yeah, just giving an example, some recent deals that we've done. We invested into Robin Games, which was founded by Jill Wilson, who is ex-Jam City. And this is a good example of addressing and disrupting a market. She was employee number 3 at Jam City and helped scale their business. She's got huge experience and expertise in the industry, but what she wanted to do was address an underserved community, which is female gamers. And from her own experience of being around a boardroom table, and she was the only woman around on the table, and the rest of the people there were men. And this was a game they were discussing that was predominantly for women, and yet it was actually a lot of time men dictating that. And she brings with her not only that prior experience, but also attacking an area, lifestyle fantasy, but effectively it's looking at home decoration, and that genre that has been poorly served in the past. And she brings with her not only herself, but also a strong, again, female-dominated team from Jam City ready to go. And then perhaps on the other side, or competitive gaming, PC versus mobile, we invest into Vita Games, which is based out in Ireland. And they're looking at providing the satisfying experience that you get with League of Legends. That they're actually a team that came out of Riot and EA, and they're looking at detoxifying a lot of the elements of PvP, which we found super compelling. And I think there's a lot of space for that kind of community building. So again, that was relating to my point about disruption doesn't have to be bad. So what do we look for? The game is one aspect if you're a content company, as is the product if you're a tech or platform company. We first look at whether the right fit for us, how much money you've raised before, what stage you're at now, whether you have 50 people, in which case, because we're cutting 1 to 2 million checks, then it's unlikely that we're able to help out, because your burn rate, your cost base, will be extremely large and your valuation will be high. Also, whether you're a gaming company, and I field a lot of those cold inbounds that are actually games companies, so emphasizing any applicability to games would be a key criterion for us. But then also looking at the market opportunity, because as I mentioned, we're a venture fund, and the stage at which we come into, at the seed stage, we're going to, on average, lose money on the majority of the portfolio. So we're looking for, because it's so risky at the early stage, those companies that are the winners to actually return the fund. If not, and here's a rough metric for you when you're evaluating whether your company is applicable for VC, that you can deliver 10x. And so for us, that's thinking about a 250 million exit valuation onwards. And maybe that's a bit daunting for some people, and that's in 5 to 10 years, I might add. But that is the level of expectation with VC. And I think if you feel that you can deliver that, great. If you feel like you can't, VC can be expensive money, and there are often, again, cheaper ways if you don't have those high expectations, the moonshot deals that are around. You can get other sorts of financing through projects, financing, publishers, etc. But that's one of the evaluations that I think a venture capital funds look at. Then we look at the team, and the team is most important at the seed stage, because in the same way that your company is likely to fail at the early stage, also your first game or potentially your first product will fail. And therefore, it's got to be the team who's got to adapt their thinking and pivot and work out what went wrong, and keep on going effectively. We've, from our past experience, it's actually emphasized to us that team is almost more product than product, but product is important because it indicates how you're thinking, and it needs to marry well with the company vision. And then yes, financial opportunity, it's somewhat interlinked with the market opportunity, but more down on the business side, how much do you need to raise for this? Yeah, what are the valuations that you're speaking about? How are you going to monetize? Common issues for us related to those criteria, just not scalable enough. And what I mean by that is there can be some amazing businesses, but the cost base will carry on increasing even as revenue increases. And what venture capital funds look for is that nice increase in revenue, whilst at the same time this is what games can do that succeed. You don't have to employ that many more people. The marginal cost of the next sale is very low versus, again, the sale on the revenue side, you're getting in more and more money. So that's one aspect of it. And then also we invest into a company, and therefore if you're pitching a single game, then we're not very interested, because we need to think about what else you're building there, because we're in there for the long term. We're providing equity financing, and so that provides you creative freedom. That provides you the time to think about what you're building, bringing in the right people as well. But at the same time, if you're just thinking about I've got this amazing idea for a game, I think that is insufficient for VC. And then in the same way that I've broken down the evaluation of a company, you should also evaluate us. And I've outlined 3 areas here, like how does the VC help with hiring? How much do they really know about games? How good is their graduation rate? How much value add can they provide? And not without reason, we rank, or at least we feel we rank quite highly on those 3 aspects. Here is my email address. I'm just checking on the time, and I have spoken a bit over, I'm sorry, but I'd love to field some questions if and when you have some.
Great, thank you so much, Harry. And there you go. I see we got a question right away, but let me ask you something first. So you don't describe yourselves as impact investors, and we're games for change. So basically, we're about games for positive social impact. And I know in the impact investing world, I think there's a conversation about what the double bottom line. So the 10x return for your investors. Are investors open to taking less return on a project that has a social impact benefit? And also, to what extent do you, clearly the 2 examples you gave, I think I would describe as impact projects, reducing toxicity in the gaming world, supporting women-owned company and women gamers. Those are, social impact projects. Do you look at the double bottom line, the social good, as well as the return?
Yeah, it's a good question. Sorry, I'm just, okay, good. They hear you. There was a question about whether you, so the question for James's benefit was about impact investing and whether there is a dichotomy between investing in venture backable businesses versus games for good and impact investing. And the easy answer is why not have both? As I outlined with Treehouse and Vila, sorry, not Vila and Robin, and actually another example I use is Treehouse, and they're bringing the competencies of games as a service to cooperative games, and so enabling almost this third space for friends to hang out in games. At the same time, a games company does have to have that impact, so you have to be able to be profitable. You have to have that scale that you can reach those users, and so there's almost this this balance of what the market demands versus actually what you're providing. And I think we are cognizant of potential side effects from games. And for example, we don't invest into real money or gambling games just purely because of the human cost, and that's an ESG factor that we're evaluating. But then also, and it's very good that you mentioned with Robin, there's female-led games, so there's within the company and the impact that you're having there and investing into the company versus the impact of the products of the company itself. That's something we've actually been actively evaluating on diversity and inclusion. To actually 3 out of the last 4 games companies we've had female founders. We're now looking at pushing and providing resources for diversity and inclusion, best practices amongst our portfolio, and creating the culture there. But then also on a pure bottom line for commercials, if there's an underserved community that isn't necessarily had the right product that's being pitched to it, or it isn't being kept in mind, that the company brand that's providing this product isn't in line with what it should be, i.e. there's an element of toxicity, or it's male dominated, and there are certain controversies around the company, I think that will feed through. And so over time, at least we're investing into companies that can bridge that gap, that are ethical, not only in their company practices, but also in the games that they're providing.
So let's jump into the queue here. Charlie, what are the market trends pre-post COVID? Interesting. Still looking for subs or microtransactions. What does that mean?
Interesting questions. If anything, market trends of post-COVID have been extant versus pre-COVID. COVID has served to accelerate those trends. They're already going on. So looking at, say, the rise of Animal Crossing, the idea of games as social squares, I feel like the analogy to games as social networks is slightly flawed in that games are able to provide so much more of a richer experience that's interactive entertainment. You're able to do much more. So I know it's cliche, but kind of metaverse thinking fits better with that, or maybe social square, where you have the base of the game and that's the social interaction, but then you're able to explore as you would, maybe you're in the school playground or the town square, and then you go off and play different things and you have fun. If anything, the trends that we're seeing are just those that were before, but just accelerated. Sub versus microtransactions. I think in-app purchases are always going to be a strong element, and Raf Costa has a good blog piece on the move towards free-to-play within gaming. So I think premium price points will soon be the reserve of, if not already, more artistic indie titles. Whereas for larger games and games that want to scale effectively because maybe they have more social elements and therefore you don't want to have that initial price point that's blocking new users to come onto the game itself, that in-app purchases will still be a large part of it. But as you rightly put out, subs have been going on for many years. I think it's just a level of sophistication now where people are treating virtual world as indistinct from the real world, and I think there's now a maturity around the market where you can start to charge for subscriptions. At the same time, I think in-app purchases will still predominate. So yeah, I guess hopefully that addressed your question, Charlie.
So we have 5 minutes left, Harry. Giving you notes. So the next question, Gilson, I think you answered this already. Do you look at the company or at a good game project? So I think you mentioned pretty much you're looking for the company, not so much the game project. Correct?
Yeah, it's a good indication. I'm happy to put you in touch with. We're fairly familiar with most of the people in the industry. It's quite small actually when you get down to it. we can forward you over to people. But if it's on a pure game project basis, we wouldn't come in. Yeah, we look far more at the company that you're building rather than an individual game. It has to be the team that is strong enough to deliver that game or the next game, and what competencies, what lessons are you learning if that game doesn't do well. So it's working out what is the cost of failure for that company.
All right, and Bob asks, are you looking at the potential of targeted health games given the recent US FDA approval of Alkali Interactive's game-based treatment for ADHD?
It is actually interesting, and that is an area where, because it's been so mixed between the healthcare community, I do sometimes chat with people on that side, and there's almost a reticence to allow gaming in, but definitely looking into the potential. For us, it's working out who's actually going to pay for this in the end game. Is it going to be potentially insurers? Is it going to be healthcare providers, either hospitals? Is it going to be people? And then working out, how much people will be willing to spend, the efficacy of it, and then also, how many people this would address, what's the overall addressable market. So, and also whether the game is fun, because there are a fair few non-for-profit games that ignore the value of good game design. And so I think what is key is thinking that people do want to be altruistic, and I believe that generally, but they need to be given excuses. So that isn't an excuse to cut short on enjoyable games and the game mechanics that are there just because you are potentially giving to charity or it's helping solve a certain certain disorder or helping ameliorate.
So in just a couple of minutes, let's try and get to a few last questions. So I'm not sure if this is Nicole. You mentioned most investments are likely to fall short. How do you assess the profitability or the return of a company at the stage you're investing in, so you can triangulate superior investment opportunities in the future? Is there a short answer to that?
Yes, I'll try and give it. That's a good question. We look at the market. So within that game genre, if it's action RPG, what is the size of that overall market? Are you growing that market? Is it similar to any products that are existing within that? Then we'll do some basic assumptions on how well you're monetizing a particular user, ARPU. If it's on the business side, i.e. B2B, how much we're charging for a contract for each company, how many companies are addressable there. And then we'll work up from that, thinking, can this company deliver these kind of, the revenues that are required to deliver 10x? So I haven't worked out the math myself, but going down from 250 million, maybe you get 2 to 4x revenue multiple. Are you able to deliver maybe 50 to 100 million in revenue? EBITDA maybe down at 20. So that goes down to, oh god, the maths, 10 to 20 million EBITDA. Do you believe that you can get there? And then also, are there acquirers, or do you feel that you can put out an initial public offering, which are the two ways really that venture capital firms get their returns? There are secondaries, but if all of those answers are yes, then definitely 10x. Great.
So in the minute we have left, Gabriel, I'm going to jump over your question because I think maybe it was just answered, and get to Stuart, because I think this is very interesting. Will games receive more scrutiny from regulators related to the use of data and revenue models that leverage impulse buys like loot boxes? The question is, will scrutiny be greater, less, or remain the same? So I guess that's a trend question. All right, what are you seeing in the marketplace? More scrutiny from regulators, and is that a deterrent of some kind?
I think there's a level of re-education that needs to go on the regulation side. Working out because if you're going to shut down those kind of data practices in games, you're also going to have to do that on e-commerce, looking at Facebook's practices. And I think maybe if you look on the platform level at self-regulation, Apple are starting to do that with IDFA. But when it comes to longer-term regulation of on the governmental side, I think there will be more scrutiny just purely because of the size of the market. But I would say this is an investor into the games industry. At least what we invest into, I don't think we touch anywhere near the more murky practices of impulse buying and loot boxes for the most part. So yeah, it's a hard question without going into specifics, but probably greater just because of sheer size.
All right, and we have to leave it there. Our time is up. I think we got everyone's at Gabriel. So let's just, Gabriel said, generally, is there anything that's seen as being good for bringing investors versus, I guess, what isn't? Seems like a pretty broad question. I don't know. Can you field that very quickly, Harry?
Quickly, bringing investors at the very early stage, don't try and go through intermediaries. We like to talk to you. If you have a corporate finance person, they're usually just there to take some of your bottom line. There can be some good corporate finance people, but I usually associate them with, again, coming from tech venture, whereas a bit later stage, they can help in scaling up the company, introducing to the right people there. But when it's just you and an idea, I prefer just to
I don't know, Harry, your sound just dropped out.
Oh no!
Now you're back. But I think that's a sign that we should wrap. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we have another session at 4 o'clock with Ed Metz. Hope you all come back. And Harry, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. I'll just mention that again, your email address is at the top of the chat queue. Folks can hit you there. Thanks again.
Great.